Hi everyone. I just wanted to take a few minutes and go over the story of Oedipus with you. I know some of you already know the story pretty well, and you're familiar with a lot of the themes that are in it, and certainly have probably heard of the Oedipal complex that Freud so famously came up with based on this play. This play is referred to frequently in modern times as well as ancient times. We've been reading Aristotle this week, and you probably noticed that he uses this play as the exemplar, really just the par excellence of tragedies in his time. And to this day, I think it still defines what a tragedy is. Aristotle, put it out there in Poetics, and we can see that tragedies still follow this kind of pattern of someone from a high place who falls, very formal, dramatic language, and it ends, of course, with death. A comedy would do the reverse. It would deal with more common people, not someone in a high place who falls. The language is more of the common people in a comedy, and it ends usually in some kind of marriage, or in the case of Lysistrata, which we'll get to, kind of a coupling. So it's kind of, the same criteria but opposite for tragedies and comedies. So this play, Oedipus the King, was written by Sophocles, and Sophocles was famous in his own time as a playwright. He made money that way. He won lots and lots of contests and awards, and he was active in government. He had a government position, and he did just fine. He had a wife and 5 kids, and he died in his 90s, so he had a pretty good life for, even for someone in these days, never mind his own days. In his play of Oedipus, we can see lots of themes. Excuse me while I grab my little notes here. Some themes that he talks about and certainly alludes to symbolically as well as pretty clearly are the ideas about vision, sight, and blindness. So the vision and lightness and enlightening kind of um, intellect and knowledge versus blindness, darkness, ignorance. And not ignorance in the sense that we sometimes use it as an insult when we call someone ignorant, but as a lack of knowing. Oedipus doesn't know who he is. He's trying to solve a riddle. He tries to use reason, which we think of as a good thing, right? We think we should use our intellect, but it doesn't work for Oedipus because he is doomed. His destiny is set before he's born, and he doesn't really have any control over his life. And in this worldview, no one does. It's up to the gods. We saw that a bit in the Iliad. There was a little bit of control in that Achilles could have chosen whether he wanted to have a short, glorious life or a long, kind of boring life, and he chose the short, glorious life, and that's fine. But it seems like Oedipus doesn't even get that much choice in his life. So, what does that say about the rest of us? And I think we still sort of refer to this worldview when we say things like, well, it's just what's meant to be. It is what it is. Nothing I can do. If that's what's fated, oh, well, what are you going to do? That lack of control over one's life, to me anyway, is pretty distressing. Um, we need to be able to assert some control, right, over what we do and the decisions we make. Oedipus thinks he's doing that his whole life, but in the end, learns that it's up to the gods. Now, some of the characters, I think Jocasta and Laius, especially her first husband, um, kind of mock the gods a little bit, not blatantly, but think that they can outsmart them when the prophecy is that their son will kill the father. We learn about the sleeping with the mother later on, but in order to thwart that prophecy from coming true, they try to have the son die so that he won't kill them. But of course, he's saved by a shepherd who gives him to another person who gives the baby to the king and queen of Corinth because they don't have a child, and they were so thrilled to have a baby. But Jocasta and Laius not so thrilled because he comes back and certainly fulfills the prophecy. So there's that kind of stuff going on in this play. There's also other kinds of imagery that we see, like the ship. We're going to see a lot of that in the text. The ship is Thebes, and it's kind of a sinking ship with the plague that's happening, and they need someone to steer them to safe ground, and that would be Oedipus. He's done it before by solving the riddle of the Sphinx and getting rid of that plague, and now the people of Thebes need him to do it again to save them. Sadly, he has to sacrifice himself in order to do that, but he's willing to do that. As far as a leader goes, he seems like a pretty good leader. He cares about his people. He seems to care about them more than he cares about himself. And we're going to see some passages that allude to that. It's also kind of interesting that the hunter becomes the hunted in this one. He's kind of both. He's also an outsider, so he's heroic in that way, that he comes from another place to Thebes, and he's got all these obstacles. He tries to find someone to help him. He calls on Tiresias and Creon and the shepherd, and they don't, and Jocasta, right? They all try to aid him, but he doesn't really want to hear what they have to say because it doesn't jibe with what's in his mind and what he thinks of himself and the world. So it's interesting that when we read Aristotle and we think about tragedies and tragic heroes, we wonder about tragic flaws. Now, what is Oedipus's flaw? What did he do wrong? It's hard to find, to be honest. He doesn't seem like a bad person. He's a good leader. He's a good father / brother. Kind of creepy, I know. He tries to do what's right, but he does get angry a lot. We see that in the play. There's a lot of mention of his quick anger, and certainly that's what leads him to kill the man in the crossroads in the first place. He doesn't know it's his father, but it is. So I've highlighted some stuff in the text. This is a PDF I found online. It doesn't look exactly like our version because this one is in columns, but it's pretty close, and it's translated by the same person, David Green. And translations are so important to have the same one. If you speak another language, you know that translating stuff isn't word for word. It's not literal. It's not easy. Sometimes, especially if it's an ancient text, we need to find more modern language that captures the ideas of the original, not just the literal words. So this particular translation is the one we're looking at because it's in the book. One thing I do want to mention about it, this is an older edition, the one I'm showing you on the screen, and it capitalizes the word God, and the one in our book does not, because polytheistic, when there's many gods, it's lowercase g. In this older version, it's a capital G for the sake of, I think, modernity, because that's what people do nowadays when they think of God. But this would not be the monotheistic God, not one God. It's still, when it says a God, it is better off being lowercase, so don't let that throw you too much. All right, so I just want to go through the text and clear up anything that may have given you any kind of problems. So right at the beginning, we have Oedipus come out among his people, the Thebans, and commiserate with them and say, I know things are terrible and I'm here to help. I don't think it's fit that I should hear of your problems from messengers. I want to hear it myself. I want to be a hands-on kind of leader. I want to help and I want to share and do all I can. And he says, I, Oedipus, whom all men call the great. So he is bragging a little, but he's not wrong. They do call him great because he kind of is so far in this situation. So he turns to the priest and says, okay, what can I do? You know, what's going on? The priest kind of sums up what's going on so that the audience knows what the problem is. There's been some kind of plague cast upon Thebes, and we see the shipwreck kind of motif and symbolism here. King, you yourself have seen our city reeling like a wreck already. It lifts its prow. They're looking for some kind of calm in the storm. It's referred to as anchorage later. We learn that the women can't bear children. When they do have children, they die. Even the animals, the livestock, no one's bearing children. There's no fertility at all. And they say, because we thought of you as a god, but rather judging you the first of men, we're coming to you for our help. You've saved our city before, solving the riddle of the Sphinx, and we look to you to save it again. He says, They say, perhaps you'll hear a wise word from some god, perhaps you will learn something from a man. And that's a bit of foreshadow because I think Oedipus will learn from a man, mostly from Creon, somewhat, of course, from Tiresias and the others who give him information. But yeah, he's definitely going to learn some stuff in here. Um, the chorus, by the way, and the antistrophe and the strophe, those are theatrical, dramatic devices so that Oedipus has and the others have someone to talk to. And they represent sort of the common man, the common person of Thebes, what they would be thinking. So we get the thoughts of those people without it being sort of intrusive or picking out one character. It's a group. It would be 12 or 15 people. Actually, Sophocles I think increased it from 12 to 15 for the chorus. He also, by the way, increased the number of characters, main characters on stage at a time to 3 rather than 2. So he definitely um, was an innovator in his time. And we have another ship reference here when they say neither tower nor ship is anything when empty and none live in it together. So why rule a place that's empty? Because everyone's dying, right? So they're trying to implore him to help them and to save Thebes. Now Oedipus responds, I know that you're sick, but none of you are sick as I am because I feel all your pain in addition to mine. So again, that's kind of a good attribute, I think. He is trying to be empathetic. He cares about the people, not just himself. He's not selfish. He's already sent his brother-in-law Creon to Apollo, to the oracle, to find out what he should do to help save the city. And he says he'll do whatever the gods say to do. So he's not certainly disrespectful of the gods. Creon, his brother-in-law, comes and says he's got good news and he's ready to tell everybody. He wants to know if Oedipus wants to hear it in private or in public for everybody else to hear. And I think to his credit, Oedipus says, speak it to all. The grief I bear it more for these than for my own. Here. I think it's supposed to say heart. Yeah, it does say heart. This PDF is a little bit corrupted. So he says, let everybody hear it. He's transparent. He's not trying to hide anything. So Creon tells him, okay, here's what they say. We have to find the person who killed our former king, Laius, and he has to be punished. So Oedipus starts asking some questions, like a good detective would. He asks, what happened to him? Where was he? Who survived? What's the story? Were there any witnesses? Oedipus says he's never seen him, which he has seen him because it's his own father, but he doesn't know that yet for sure. Creon says that the person who came back, only one person in the king's entourage survived an attack by robbers who murdered everybody but that one man. And this is important because the witness reports that it was many people, not just one. This comes up over and over in the play because if it's more than one, obviously it can't be just one. And we find out that Oedipus had killed one person in a similar situation. But if it's true that it was more than one, it couldn't have been him. And that'll come up later. So there's more questions. Oedipus says, how come you didn't look for the murderer back when it happened? And Creon says, well, we were a little bit busy with the whole Sphinx thing going on. We had to deal with that. And then you came along and solved the riddle. The other king was dead and we just made you king and, everything's been good. So Oedipus says, you know what? I need to find this murderer, not just because the gods say so, although that's a really good reason. He says, but in my own interest, because whoever killed the previous king may want to kill me too. So, it's in my own interest that I would do it as well. And he says a little bit farther down here, God will decide whether we prosper or remain in sorrow. So he's kind of saying that it's up to the gods to decide. And of course, it's true in this case that they do decide everything. We learn over here that by praying, these supplicants, can try to avert fate, but if the gods don't want to change things, then they won't. And here's another allusion to ships, timbers being rotted, and the idea that the city is like a sinking ship that needs some help. Again, we're reminded that the people are dying and that children who are born lie dead on the naked earth. It's a really sad situation in Thebes, and they need help. There's also a little bit of wartime imagery going on here, um, when they talk about the gods fighting the ones who are in favor of Thebes and the ones who don't like Thebes. So it's kind of a lot of that tumultuous, violent kind of imagery. And it really is sort of a violent play when we get to the end. Oedipus says that he wants to know who did it. If anybody has any information at all, they need to tell him what they know about the murder of King Laius. And it's okay, they won't be harmed. If they know anything, in fact, he'll pay a reward and be grateful too. But if they don't say something and they knew, then they're going to be in big trouble. They're going to get exiled and they won't be welcomed in Thebes at all. And he says, upon the murderer, I invoke this curse, whoever the murderer is, because he's talking to all the people in Thebes. Whether he is one man and all unknown or one of many, may he wear out his life in misery to miserable doom. Well, little does he know, of course, that he is dooming himself there, and his curse will come true. He says, if with my knowledge he lives at my hearth, I pray that I myself may feel his curse. Yep, he's definitely going to do that. He says, since I am now the holder of his office and have his bed and wife that once was his. Yep, that's true. And that we would have common children if he had had any kids, but it's like, oh dear, no, that's again creepy. And he says, I fight in his defense as for my father. It's like as if he were my own father, right? And of course he is. So he doesn't even realize what he's saying. He can see, he's got vision, he's intelligent, but he is ignorant and blind to his own truth. And that's something that happens, I think. He says he can't compel the gods to do anything, but he says that here, he who killed lies and kill them or expel them. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong part. But he says you can't compel the gods to do things over here, right? No compulsion on the gods against their will. No man can do that. There's nothing you can do. If the gods want something, they're going to do what they do. And then we're told the stories. The chorus says, okay, we heard that he was killed by certain wayfarers, not just one again, so that's kind of important. And he says that he is sent for Oedipus has said he is sent for Tiresias, who is the incredibly wise prophet. He knows everything. He knows more than anyone. He can see more than what's right there. He can see the future. He can, communicate with the gods and goddesses. He knows everything. And Oedipus acknowledges that. He says, you have no eyes, but in your mind you know what's going on. He has respect for him. He's great. He says, please tell us who killed King Laius, and we'll kill them or expel them from the country. We need your help. And Tiresias says, oh, that's right. I had known this well and I'd forgotten, or else if I'd remembered, I wouldn't have come here. Oedipus says, what? What do you mean you wouldn't have come? Tiresias says, let me go. I don't want to have to do this. I don't want to tell anybody anything that I know. Oedipus starts to get mad. He gets angry, as he does. He says, what are you talking about? Why won't you tell us what you know? Tiresias says, all of you here know nothing. I will not bring to light of day my troubles mine. Rather than call them yours. He says, I'll keep it to myself. I don't want anybody to know. Again, Oedipus, you can see him getting more and more angry. What do you mean? You know something, but you're not going to talk? And Tiresias says, yeah, I'm not going to talk. Oedipus gets mad. Tiresias says, you blame my temper, but you do not see that your own lives within you. And that's interesting. His temper lives within him. And so does a lot of stuff that he doesn't know about. He says, later on, because Oedipus keeps getting mad, against this answer, let your temper rage. Right? He's getting madder and madder the whole time. He accuses Tiresias of being part of the plot to have himself murdered. Not Tiresias, but to have Oedipus murdered. He says, wait a minute. What are you talking about? And he thinks that he had Laius killed too. Had you eyes, I would have said you alone murdered him. And Tiresias is like, what? No, of course. Why would I murder him? I did not do that. And then Tiresias gets mad and he says, you know what? Fine. I'm gonna tell you the truth. You are the land's pollution, Oedipus. And Oedipus gets mad. How dare you? Do you think you'll escape all this kind of accusation? Tiresias continues by saying that you are the murderer of the king whose murderer you seek. Oedipus thinks it's a riddle. It's not a riddle. Tiresias really couldn't be any clearer. He says in a couple lines farther down that I say that with those you love best, you live in foulest shame unconsciously. It's like, you know, it just can't be any clearer. Oedipus says, was this your design or is this Creon's plot? Teresa's like, what? No, Creon's no harm to you. You are hurting yourself. Oedipus says, well, I don't think so. I think Creon's trying to plot to take over the throne and that Tiresias is in on it because don't forget, Creon is Jocasta, who is the queen. He's Jocasta's brother. So he has some claim to the throne if you really wanted to push it. And if he killed Oedipus, he would probably be the next king. And then Oedipus keeps going with his little rant. He's saying, listen, Tyrese, if you're so smart, why didn't you solve the riddle of the Sphinx? How come you weren't there to help the people then and deliver the citizens from the plague? He says, you're doing all this so that you can have a spot when Creon becomes king, and you'll be sorry because you guys are both guilty of treason. And the chorus says, oh, this anger has to end. Don't speak in anger, either one of you. No one gets anywhere when they're angry like that. And Tiresias, and he's still kind of mad at the accusations that Oedipus has made. He says, you have your eyes, but see not where you are in sin, nor where you live, nor whom you live with. Do you know who your parents are? Unknowing, you are an enemy to kith and kin in death, beneath the earth and in this life. A deadly-footed, double-striking curse from father and mother both shall drive you forth out of this land with darkness on your eyes that now have such straight vision. Like he thinks he can see things, but he can't. So this is all going to come true, of course. Tiresias knows. And that Oedipus will learn the secret of his marriage. Down here, the secret of his marriage. And all these other things establishing a grim equality between you and your children. You know nothing, he says. Because, again, Oedipus doesn't realize that he's sleeping with his mother and has had children with his mother, which makes him his mother's son and his own children's brother, right? And that's what Tiresias is saying. And Tiresias, well, Oedipus is saying, you taunt me, you're an idiot, kind of. And Tiresias says, well, the parents who bred you didn't think so. They thought I was wise. No, don't forget, Tiresias is from Thebes. Oedipus thinks he himself is from Corinth. So why would parents from Corinth be consulting with Tiresias, a Theban? So Oedipus says, what parents? Stop, wait, what? He doesn't know really what he's talking about, what Tiresias is talking about. So Oedipus says, it doesn't matter what happens to him. All that matters to him is that he can save his city. Again, that's the sign, of course, of a good leader. I think we all notice that a good leader should care about his people. Oedipus does care about his people, and he's saying that. He doesn't realize the sacrifice he's going to make, and it's worth wondering, would he make that sacrifice if he knew it was going to be that big a sacrifice? And Tiresias, he does certainly get annoyed with Oedipus because Oedipus has accused him of so many terrible, terrible things. And he says that Tiresias says the murderer is here and he'll be shown to be a citizen, a true native Theban. He'll exchange blindness for sight. He'll know what's going on. He'll see the truth of everything, but it will be very painful. He shall be proved father and brother both to his own children in his house. Oedipus doesn't understand what he's saying. He doesn't know yet. He still is in darkness. The chorus talks about it, and they talk about the gods and the whole situation of people in general and mankind, right? And then Creon comes in and he says to the people of Thebes, hey, I've heard that I've been accused of some pretty nasty things by the king. That's ridiculous. I don't want to live with that, and I need to clear this up. And the chorus said, well, maybe it's just because he was angry. Don't worry. But Creon's like, but wait a minute. Did he say that I was trying to get the throne and that I lied to him about stuff? And the chorus says, well, yeah, he did. But, I don't know why. And Creon says, were his eyes straight in his head? Kind of an interesting thing to say. Like, was he seeing straight? Was he thinking straight? And the chorus, like, I don't know. I don't know what princes are thinking, what royalty is thinking. And Oedipus and he start talking. And, of course, Oedipus is still angry at Creon and kind of accuses him right to his face of saying that he wants to take over Oedipus's throne. And Creon says, wait a minute, listen to me. Oedipus doesn't want to listen. Creon says, listen to what I have to say. It's the least you can do. So Oedipus, tries to listen, but of course he's not really paying too much attention. He's just so angry he can't hear what Creon is saying. I think we all can relate to that. You get so mad you don't even hear what the other person says. But Creon says something that's kind of interesting here. Well, Oedipus says, why did our wise old friend say this then? Talk about who was the murderer. Why did Tiresias say that? Creon says, I don't know. And when I don't know, I hold my tongue. I don't say things that I don't know anything about, which is kind of a dig, I think, at Oedipus. And Oedipus says, well, are you loyal? And Creon's like, he's loyal and he's going to deny all the accusations. And what he says in his defense, besides just saying I would never, he comes up with a really, I think, logical reason why would he want to take Oedipus's throne. He says, as it stands, all the prizes are mine and without fear. He says, look, I'm equal to you and my sister in power. I have the same power you guys have, but I don't have any of the fear or the responsibility. I'd be crazy to want to be king when I already have all the benefits without any of the responsibility, which is a good point. Of course, that'll change at the end, but that's okay. He says, if you discover that I made any plans together with anybody, Tiresias or anybody, kill me. But if you can't, then leave me alone, kind of thing. And the chorus says, yeah, that's true, His words are wise. You can't find any evidence. And Oedipus says, well, I have to find stuff quickly so that I can make sure the plot doesn't happen. Creon says, what are you going to do? Banish me? Oedipus says, no, I'm going to kill you, not banish you. And the chorus says, no, don't do that, don't do that. Oedipus really wants to get rid of him. That is a bit of an overreaction and a response that comes from anger, not from reason, not from intellect. So he's not always the intellectual thinker that he wants to be. Jocasta comes in. She's heard about this fight, and she wants to know what's going on. So she asks, what's going on? What's the fight all about? And Creon tells her. And Oedipus says, yeah, that's true. I do think he's plotting to take away the throne and things like that. And he has agreed to not kill or have Creon killed, but he's going to still hate Creon. And he says it over here, I shall hate him. And Creon says, what am I going to do? Natures like yours are justly heaviest for themselves to bear, which is true. It's going to bother him the most. And Creon says that he will leave and that he still proclaims his innocence, right? And the chorus says, won't you take him inside, lady? And Jocasta says, yes, when I found out what's the matter. They never want to go inside to have their arguments or their news in private. They always do it in front of the people of Thebes until the very end. So that's kind of interesting too, that they both want the people to know what's going on. So she finds out what's happened, and we find out that she has had some experience with prophecies. So Oedipus tells her that Tiresias had told him that he killed Laius, and he doesn't believe that, of course. And he says that Creon says that, and it isn't really Creon, right? It's the prophet that Oedipus is convinced Creon is in cahoots with, that Creon and Tiresias are plotting something. And Jocasta says, oh, don't concern yourself about that. If it's about the prophecies that Tiresias brings, listen, human beings have no part in the craft of prophecy. She says, my first husband had a prophecy that he should die a victim at the hands of his own son. But to avoid that prophecy, like we already said, King Laius pierced his ankles, the baby, by the hands of others, cast him forth upon a pathless hillside. So Apollo failed to fulfill his oracle to the sun that he should kill his father, and Laius also proved false in that the thing he feared, death at his son's hands, never came to pass. It's like, oh, Jocasta, it did. That's exactly what happened. Laius thought he could outsmart the gods, but he couldn't. And how much Jocasta was in on that decision, we don't know. But that is fodder for one of the projects you can do. What the gods discovers need of, easily they'll show us themselves. Don't worry about going through prophecies. If the gods want us to know something, they'll tell us. So Jocasta says, Oedipus asks what happened to Laius, and Jocasta says that he was killed at a crossroads. And Oedipus says, where was it? And she says, it was at Phocis in the country, where the road splits into three. Oedipus says, how long ago? And she says, right before you came here to solve the riddle of the Sphinx. Why? What's on your mind? He's starting to suspect that maybe it's the same place where he killed somebody. So he is a little worried. And he says, wait a minute, it was a lot of people, right? It wasn't just one. And she says, no, it was a lot. The only survivors came back and said that it was a group of people. It was many, not one. And Oedipus says, okay, well, can we get that witness? I need to talk to him because this is going to upset me. I need to know that it really was a group of people that killed Laius, not just one, because if it was one, it might have been me. And he's thinking about a lot of things. So he tells his story. When he was in Corinth, thinking he was the son of Polybus and Merope, there was a dinner. And there was a drunk guy at the dinner, and the drunk guy accuses Oedipus of being a bastard, of not being the true son of the king and queen. And he was really mad about that. Oedipus was really mad. So he asks his parents, and his parents didn't really say anything. They just said, no, don't be silly, you know. But Oedipus still had like some doubt, so he went to the oracle and asked, and it was told to him that other horrors would befall him, that he was fated to lie with his mother and show to daylight an accursed breed which men would not endure, and he was doomed to be murdered of the father that begot me. So this is the full prophecy. He will kill his father and marry his mother. He got upset and he got worried about it. He didn't want to kill his father, who he thinks is Polybus, and marry his mother, who he thinks is Merope. So he flees. He wants to get away from that oracle, from that prophecy. He comes to the place in the road, that intersection of three roads, and the people, in this case it's Laius and his entourage, won't move out of the way. They get angry. Oedipus won't move either because he's kind of stubborn. And it's a little bit of road rage going on. He becomes angry and he kills them all. That's what Oedipus does. It's like, okay. So he did kill people. And he says, and it is I and no other, have so cursed myself, and I pollute the bed of him I killed by the hands that killed him. Was I not born evil? Well, even if he did do it, is it because he was born evil, or is it because it was the work of the gods? Who knows why? Is it some flaw in him? Again, I don't see a huge flaw. It's not like he's being punished for something evil that he did. But the idea that people might be born evil or just pawns in the gods' games, there's some questions coming up here. And when people think about existence in life, these are the kinds of big questions that come up, right? So they're still talking about it, and Jocasta says that when she thinks about prophecies, that they don't come true because, like the story says, it's robbers who kill Laius, not just one person. And Jocasta says, "Oh no, don't worry about it. Prophecies don't come true. As far as prophecy goes, henceforward, I'm not going to look one way or the other. It doesn't. I don't believe in prophecy," she says, which maybe she should have, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like no matter anything that she and Laius did would have prevented that prophecy from coming true. So that's kind of quickly. So she says, "I'll send for that." He's now a shepherd. He used to be a king's servant, and find out the truth, whether it was one or more. So that's what she does, and while they're waiting, the chorus speaks, and they're kind of summing up things and giving some thoughts about how fate works. I didn't actually highlight that. That for some reason came through on the PDF. So just wanted to point that out. I was trying to find the part in my book because, again, this doesn't match perfectly. Oh, Jocasta says, oh, right, here we are. So now the messenger comes, and I'm sorry, the messenger comes, and this isn't the shepherd, right? This isn't the guy who worked the lies. This is the messenger from Corinth. And he's got sort of good news and bad news at the same time. And it's the same news that Polybus is dead. So we think that that's Oedipus's father, or Oedipus thinks that, and so does Jocasta. So sad, of course, that he's dead, but he was old and he was not killed by his son. So Oedipus kind of thinks that this is really good news. He says, "This is great. He's dead, and I didn't kill him." He doesn't want his father to be dead, but I mean, still, it's kind of, like I said, kind of good news. So they want Oedipus now to be the king. So they'll choose Oedipus to be their king. That is the rumor there. So that's kind of good news for Oedipus, right? So Oedipus asks him how he died, just to make sure that he had nothing to do with killing him. Messenger says, yes, he died of sickness and old age. And look what he says about the oracles, what Oedipus says. But they, the oracles, as they stand, he's taken them away with him. They're dead as he himself is, and worthless. And Jocasta says, see, I told you, don't worry about that stuff. And Oedipus says, yeah, but I was misled by fear. So, I won't worry about that anymore. Phew, glad that's out of the way. But of course it's not. And the messenger says, what were you worried about in the first place? And Oedipus tells him, oh, I was afraid about the oracle. Tells him all about the oracle. And the messenger says, oh, you didn't ever need to worry about that. And Oedipus says, how come? Messenger says, because Polybus was no relation to you by blood. Oedipus says, what? He wasn't my father? And the messenger says, no more than I am. Nope, not your father at all. And Oedipus says, well, how can that be? And the messenger says, well, I happened to take you off of the mountain that day when you were 3 days old, and I brought you to Polybus so that, you wouldn't die, and they wanted a baby. And Oedipus is kind of like, wait, what? So Oedipus says, well, he wanted to make sure he is the same baby that the messenger is talking about. He says, okay, what was my illness when you got me? And the messenger said, well, it's in your ankles. You were fettered. You had a pin put through your ankle so you couldn't crawl away, pierced and fettered. Of course, Oedipus, the adult, still has the scars and actually some problems with his ankles and feet from that injury when he was a baby. So Oedipus realizes he is that baby, and he was not Polybus's son. Now, Jocasta's kind of she's figuring it out too, right? She's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? You should just stop trying to find any kind of answers, Oedipus. And of course, he's not going to stop. She tells him to ignore it. Oh, just don't pay attention to it. It's okay. Oedipus can't. He can't stop finding the truth. And I wonder if anyone could once they start to unravel such a tale. It would certainly be difficult. And he can't, right? He can't stop there. So she wants him to, though, because she understands, or starts to understand, the truth of it all. Jocasta says, oh, Oedipus, God help you. God keep you from the knowledge of who you are. And she says again, oh, Oedipus, unhappy Oedipus, that is all I can call you, and the last thing that I shall ever call you. Or foreshadowing that she's going to end her own life, which we know she does. Oedipus thinks that she's upset and doesn't want him to find out his origins because he might be of low birth. He might not be royalty after all. And that she has high-flown pride. And he says that he's a child of fortune, beneficent fortune, and I shall not be dishonored. She's the mother from whom I spring. The she is kind of ambiguous, isn't it? Is it fortune or Jocasta that he's talking about? So, kind of both. So, the herdsman, the shepherd, comes in, and he doesn't know why he's there. The messenger recognizes him from the old days, but the herdsman doesn't recognize the messenger. And Oedipus says, "You know this guy?" And the herdsman says, "No, I don't think I do." And the messenger said, "Oh yeah, remember back in the day we would both um, graze our sheep on the mountain, and we used to hang out once in a while, basically." And the herdsman's like, "Oh yeah, I remember you now." And the messenger says, "Yeah. And I took that baby from you. Remember that?" And the herdsman said, "Wait, what? I don't want to talk about that," because he knows that that's going to be bad for him, because the herdsman was supposed to leave the baby out to die, not give it to somebody else. And he doesn't want to say anything about it. Now, this is a very old man. Oedipus threatens him. He said he's going to hurt him. You will talk with pain to urge you. The herdsman begs him, "Please don't hurt an old man, sir." Oedipus says, "Here, one of you, twist his hands behind him." And the herdsman's like, "Okay, what do you want to know? You tortured me, and I'll tell you." And Oedipus wants to know who the child is and where the herdsman got the child from. The herdsman says, "Yeah, I did do that, and I wish I died that day." And Oedipus is kind of mean. You will die unless you tell me truly. Um, the herdsman says that he got the baby from someone in the castle. Go ask her yourself. She's still here. It's Jocasta. The herdsman says the child was called his child, but she within, your wife, would tell you best how all this was. Oedipus says, "She gave it to you? Jocasta gave you the baby?" So it's coming together a little bit for him too. And Oedipus says, "She was so hard." Its mother telling him, the herdsman, to get rid of the baby, right? And the herdsman says, "Yeah, because she was afraid of the evil oracles." So Jocasta's interesting. Is she the stereotypical mother mushball, like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for everything," or does she have some control and some accountability for what's happened? I don't see her as a victim. She does seem to be sort of okay with protecting herself. Well, certainly back when Oedipus was born, and even now when she kills herself, that's sort of an act of self control. It's like she won't even give the gods the satisfaction of ending her life, right? She's going to do it herself. So she's kind of an interesting person in the play. But anyway, so knowing that that happened, Oedipus is now getting a little bit upset, of course, because he realizes it. The herdsman pitied the baby, didn't want to have it be killed. Um, and once he realizes it, Oedipus realizes everybody leaves except the chorus, and they go through and talk about what's been happening, how miserable it is, how awful. And then a messenger comes out to tell the audience and the people of Thebes, on the stage, what has happened, that troubles hurt the most when they prove self-inflicted. And the chorus is, "What's going on? What happened?" The messenger says, "Queen Jocasta is dead, and she has killed herself." And here's the story. When Oedipus left the stage a few minutes ago, he went into the house, his house, and he burst in shouting that, "Somebody give me a sword. I want to kill this woman, my mother and my wife. It's her fault everything happened." He raves in, he goes into the bedroom, and there she is. She's hanged herself. He cuts her down, and she's got these giant pins. Like, if you think about the heavy cloth robes that they wore, like the toga things, you have to have some way to fasten them so they don't fall off. They didn't have buttons or snaps or Velcro, but they had these really long pins, and they're called brooches in this version. And he takes them from her and gouges out his eyes with them. And he shrieks about it, and all the I call it ague, the bleeding, the stuff from the eyes oozes down and runs down into Oedipus's beard, and it's black and gory, and he has blinded himself. And he says he's going to cast himself out of the land and not remain to bring a curse on his house. Of course, we know that that's exactly what he had said about the killer of Laius. So sure enough, the curse he cast on the killer is being carried out on himself, because he finds out he is the killer. So it's a really graphic scene. This would typically be done off stage, because an audience wouldn't want to see that, and they certainly wouldn't have cast it back then, so you could see it. So some things have to happen off stage. Oedipus comes out. He shouts darkness. There is the darkness and the lightness. Now he has the light of intelligence and knowledge, but he's put out his own eyes. He doesn't want to think about the evil. He doesn't want to see anyone. And he says that. Who do I want to see? Who am I going to look at? Nothing's sweet to me. My children aren't sweet. This land isn't sweet. Nothing. It's all appalling and just horrific to him. He wishes he had died when he was a baby, that the herdsman had not saved him. And the chorus kind of says, yeah, you would have been better off dead as a baby. They agree with him. It's just going to be terrible for him. He worries about his children. Again, he's not a bad guy, but he's going to worry about things. He's still a little bit cocky. The chorus says, yeah, I don't know. You would have been better off dead than blind and living. Like, why didn't you just kill yourself? It's kind of interesting advice from the chorus. But Oedipus says, what I have done here was the best. Don't tell me otherwise. Do not give me further counsel. It's like, okay. He doesn't want to hear that what he did wasn't for the best. But he does go on and talk about what he's going to do. He's going to cast himself out. And again, he worries a bit about his daughters. His sons will be fine, he says. But he worries about his daughter. And the chorus has told us, by the way, that Creon is the sole ruler. He will become king. And we can see that at this point, he seems like a logical, kind of, I don't say mellow, that's not quite right, but he's not rash. He's calm. He doesn't engage in those arguments and get angry like Oedipus did. He seems to be someone who will be a good leader as well. And he says over here about, trusting, Creon says that even Oedipus will trust the gods because Creon is going to consult the gods about his ruling of Thebes, which seems to be a wise thing to do at this point. Oedipus again says his sons will be fine, but he worries about his daughters. Creon, being the good guy that he is, has called for the daughters to join Oedipus so that he can be with them one more time before he's exiled. Nothing good will come for the girls. No one's going to want to marry them. They are products of incest, and they all know that. They're going to have it tough. Oedipus asks Creon to take care of them, and Creon will, for a while anyway. And then Oedipus will be exiled and banished. Creon says at the end that Oedipus can't be the master of everything anymore, right? He's done with conditions and giving orders. Oedipus, don't take the children from me. Creon says, do not seek to be master in everything, for the things you mastered did not follow you throughout your life. Things are good, but guess what? Not so much anymore. And it seems like Creon might be insinuating that you can't control everything. You can't be the master of everything, try as you may. And we can certainly see that in this play. And the way the chorus ends the play is kind of interesting, I think. It says, count no mortal happy till he has passed the final limit of his life secure from pain. Don't envy people when they're alive. Don't wish you were them because you don't know how it's going to turn out in the end. In this case, Oedipus was way up high. He was king. He was adored. He was great. Everybody loved him. He had a great life with his wife and kids. And then, a tragic fall, right? So don't envy the people at the top because it's not always going to be so great for them either. Well, I do hope you enjoyed the play, and I hope this explanation helped a little. I hope you enjoyed the movie too. And I look forward to reading your comments about it in the discussion board. See you soon.